further focusing on how both can be harnessed to ensure, number one, farmers benefit from predictable weather and environment. But first things first, here are the highlights. Scouting for opportunities. President Uhuru Kenyatta in London on a 5-day official visit.
As government, our position probably does not need to be restated, but let me just restate it. We do not support and we cannot condone abuse of human rights. I think this has to be on record, because there is an impression that is created oftentimes as if we are out there, as government, it's as if Mr. Boynet wakes up in the morning and tells his commanders, beat up people, even when that doesn't happen.
Defending a homeland. Civil society groups urge to support security agencies in national policing.
You have a contract, the one I said initially, of doing 28 floors at a cost of 3.2, and you ended up only doing up to the podium, and you have spent the same amount. Nobody has been taken to court, no action has been taken.
And taxpayers' burden. Over 6.8 billion shillings lost in controversial NSSF contract. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Susan Thuku. My name is John Jacob Curia. A warm welcome to this bulletin. President Uhuru Kenyatta now says his unity with NASA leader Raila Odinga was out of the realization that politics would slow down development in the country. The president, who was speaking for the first time after the famous handshake between him and Raila, called on the international community to support the newfound unity, but was quick to dismiss any form of political arrangement. It was the first time the president was publicly speaking about the handshake a month ago at the steps of his Harambee House office. During his address at Chatham House, President Kenyatta told the audience that his newfound unity with opposition leader Raila Odinga was based on the greater good for Kenya. The president challenged leaders to ensure that politics and competition serve the interests of the masses.
Mainstream politics in Kenya, in Britain, and everywhere else in the democratic world must be responsive to the needs of the people. My reaching out to the Honorable Raila Odinga and the opposition after our elections must be seen in this context, and not one of opening up a new political front.
President Kenyatta says the government was willing to merge its policies and those the opposition was advocating for during last year's campaigns for a better Kenya.
We cannot achieve the social and economic needs of our people in an environment of constant political bickering. As much as political competition is an essential component of democracy, leadership on all sides of the political divide must rise above the noise and focus on the needs of the people.
With insecurity threatening the region with instability, President Kenyatta called for concerted efforts aimed at stabilizing South Sudan and Somalia, warning that terrorism was becoming a common threat to the globe.
The violence employed by terrorists is an extension of their ideas. They daily announce their intention to destroy democracy and to usher in an age of fanaticism and religious tyranny. We can do more to fight their ideas.
Kenyatta also called on the international community to support efforts by the Kenyan government and other African countries to eradicate poverty as a way of ending the perennial immigration menace in European countries.
As long as there is great poverty and desperation in Africa and other parts of the world, African refugees will seek entry into Europe in their millions. Your own politics will shift in response to that influx, and probably, as we have seen, not necessarily for the better.
Earlier, the president presided over the opening of a London stock exchange where he sought to market Kenya as an investment destination. He later met the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, in a private meeting where issues of mutual interest were discussed. The president is scheduled to meet UK Prime Minister Theresa May and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in the course of his engagements in London. welcome your feedback on our SMS line 22162. That is our SMS line on Twitter at KBC Channel 1 at JCurian. Now, Deputy President William Ruto and ODM leader Raila Odinga on Tuesday came face to face for the first time since the handshake between the former Prime Minister and President Uhuru Kenyatta. The two met at the late Kenneth Matiba's Limuru home, where they had gone to condole with the family. The leaders eulogized the late Matiba as a multi-party crusader and promised to honor him and the other remaining crusaders of democracy in the country.
Deputy President William Ruto was at the home of veteran politician the late Kenneth Matiba to pay his tribute and condole with the family. And it is here that he met publicly for the first time with NASA leader Raila Odinga, who was also here to pay homage to the late icon of multi-party democracy in Kenya, Kenneth Matiba. The two leaders extending their grief to the family while remembering the great politician who passed on Sunday.
Shujaa huyu Kenneth Matiba, yale alifanya na the sacrifices that he made, he didn't make them for personal gain or for personal glory. He made them so that Kenya can become what it is today.
This was truly, by all accounts, one of the greatest Kenyans who transited the century into this century. And his life was that of selfless service to the country, dedication, and ready to pay whatever price paid for freedom.
Deputy President William Ruto says the government will honor Matiba and protect what he fought for in his struggle for a wider democratic space in the country.
We want, those of us in this generation, want to give you our assurance that we will not trample on what you fought for and your fight to have an open society in Kenya, a multi-party democracy in our country, will not be a fight in vain.
You have touched my heart by coming, especially Mr. BP. And this is something which will be very special to us all our lives. We'll remember this day.
85 years old, Matiba died on Sunday while receiving treatment at Karen Hospital in Nairobi. The government spokesperson Eric Kiraithe has confirmed that the first public funeral service for the distinguished Democrat will be held at the All Saints Cathedral Church on Wednesday 25th, while the second one will be held at Ihura Stadium in Murang'a Town on Thursday 26th of this month. However, the burial date is yet to be announced.
And may the soul of Kenneth Stanley Jindo Matiba rest in peace. Interior Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i has challenged civil society groups to work in harmony with the security urgencies for the country's stability. Speaking when he officially opened the National Policing Conference, Matiang'i said the government has been on the forefront of defending human rights, contrary to popular opinion.
The inaugural National Policing Conference at the Kenya School of Government in Lower Kabete, bringing together stakeholders in the security sector.
Let us speak candidly and sincerely to each other, because this country belongs to us equally. We may have different mandates, but we have equal responsibility for the country. And
it is here that Interior CS Dr. Fred Matiang'i appealed to civil society groups to support security agencies.
And I want to challenge our colleagues in civil society to now also spend some of their time educating our people on how to exercise their constitutional rights.
Matiang'i noted that the government is a defender of human rights, further challenging the stakeholders to work in harmony to ensure the culture of violence to express frustration ends.
We do not support and we cannot condone abuse of human rights. This has to be on record, because there is an impression that is created oftentimes as if we are out there, as government, it's as if Mr. Boynet wakes up in the morning and tells his commanders, beat up people, even when
Civil society organizations represented at the forum lauded the initiative, saying there is need for all stakeholders to join forces for the best interest of the public.
This would be a way that this conference could be useful to the country. We would very much embrace the idea of an informal, even a formal caucus working group between the police force and human rights organizations and civic community organizations to try and find a collective way in which we can bring the violence down.
Delegates will over the next 2 days discuss how to harness synergy, accountability, fundamentals of human rights, the rule of law and effectiveness in the current policing environment.
And now taxpayers risk losing over 6.8 billion shillings through a controversial contract awarded for a stalled project with the National Socio-Security Fund. The NSSF board is on the spot for authorizing the contractors of the stalled Hazina Towers project to remain on site despite the contract collapsing. And I will take that again. The NSSF board is on the spot for authorizing the contractors of a stalled Hazina Towers project to remain on site despite the contract elapsing. The contractor, who was supposed to build a 15-story building in Nairobi's Central Business District City Center, is claiming that over 6.8 billion shillings for the damages of unused equipment that have been at site for more than 2 years. The amount is in addition to the 2.5 billion shillings that has already been spent.
This information.
National Assembly's Public Investment Committee summoned the NSSF Board of Trustees to explain how and why the contractor of the 5 billion shillings Hazina Towers project was still on site despite the contract elapsing. The board was also put to task to explain why NSSF sought private consultancy on the project and paid over 1.2 billion shillings to the private consultant instead of getting services from the Department of Public Works.
Why did they choose to go for private consultant? And they knew exactly that there is a government department doing those things. Was there no conspiracy between members of the board and the consultant? Under what conditions is this contractor on site? Because if you look at the contract, it elapsed.
In the same contract, there was a clause that talked about extension of the contract in the event of any such event occurring.
In their defense, the NSSF Board of Trustees said the building contract allowed extension of period of implementation in case of circumstances beyond control. The board was, however, at pains to convince members of parliament why variations were introduced when the contract had been signed that included reduction of building from 36 floors to 15 floors.
They raised issues of financial viability, technical viability, especially because the support of the columns was the consultant had advised us to use a technology that was new in Kenya and had never been used before, and we felt that the risk would be too high.
But the corruption at the NSSF was further exposed by Labour Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani, who admitted before the committee that over 3 billion shillings had already been paid by NSSF to the contractor, who had only built a podium and 4 basements of the building.
The Cabinet Secretary will have very little leeway because these are valid contract, is enforced by force of law. I cannot come in and say stop the work.
Mr. Chairman, and this committee, together with the Cabinet Secretary, kindly let's sharpen our swords. Some people must be habitats at committee prison, others must have a home at industrial area prison, while others must be squatters at Langata Women's Prison.
The Cabinet Secretary has now instructed the NSSF management to seek legal assistance from the Attorney General on how to deal with the contractor's demand of 6.8 billion shillings that is increasing by the day.
Still in Parliament, Justice Mohammed Rassami's appointment to the Judicial Service Commission will remain frozen until the court pronounces itself on the matter. Parliament argues that it cannot consider Rassami's nomination after the High Court issued orders barring his vetting. The Law Society of Kenya had challenged the constitutionality of the President's decision to forward Rassami's name to Parliament for vetting.
must be shown the red card for defeating the list.
The nomination of Justice Mohammed Warsame to the Judicial Service Commission appears to have set the three arms of government to a collision path once again. While both the executive and the legislature argue that it is within the jurisdiction of Parliament to vet Warsame, the Law Society of Kenya has argued otherwise. Last month, the High Court issued orders barring Parliament from vetting Justice Warsame, and the National Assembly's Justice and Legal Affairs Committee said its hands were tied by the ruling.
I want to say that we were not able, because of those issues, Mr. Speaker, to approve the nomination of Justice Warsame.
In its report, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee urged Parliament to stay debate on Warsame's nomination until the court pronounces itself on the matter. The MPs would, however, carry on with the debate after expunging the recommendation.
In fact, if the committee did not bring that recommendation, amendment, I was ready to file that amendment after I read this report.
The suit, in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, by the Law Society, which I respect and I'm a member, was actually sub judice to the House.
LSK has argued that the nomination of Justice Warsame and subjecting him to vetting is a violation of Section 15, subsection 2 of the Judicial Service Act.
Anybody who believes in the judiciary that a sitting judge cannot be vetted by Parliament, they should go and do something about the provisions of Section 250(2)(b).
LSK further argues that after being elected to represent the Court of Appeal in JSC, Warsame ought to have been immediately appointed by the President and not forwarded to Parliament for vetting. For Channel 1 News, I am Edward Kabasa.
Now, this story has been grabbing headlines for the last 2 days, and the security detail of the remaining IEBC commissioners has been withdrawn. According to the IEBC Communication Officer Andrew Limo, the security of Chairman Wafula Chebukati, Commissioners Ayub Gulie and Boya Molu were withdrawn Tuesday morning. IEBC has subsequently written to the Inspector General of Police, that is Joseph Boynet, questioning what informed the drastic move.
The crisis in the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission IEBC has deepened after the security of the remaining 3 commissioners was allegedly withdrawn Tuesday morning. A statement by the Electoral Body Communication Manager Andrew Limo indicated that the security of IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati, Commissioners Ayub Gulie and Boya Molu was withdrawn without notice. Limo says the commissioner has written to the Inspector General of National Police Service, Joseph Boynet, questioning the circumstances under which the security of the 3 was withdrawn. The statement further says the action will expose the commissioners to security risks. The 3 have been under pressure to quit following Monday's resignation of Vice Chair Connie Nikadha Maina. Commissioners Dr. Paul Kurgat and Margaret Mwachanya. Latest calls coming from Gatundu South and Mwingi Central MPs Moses Kuria and Gideon Mulungi respectively.
Hata kama tukitaka kuendelea na hii ya Chebukati, wakati makomishina 4 out of 7 wameenda, hiyo ni kama 60%. Si hata kama ni kampuni inafanya liquidation.
Tuliona Mrs. Kombe alitoroka akaenda Amerika, na sasa hawa wamefuata. Chilomba amepelekwa nyumbani. Kwa hivyo tunaambia Chebukati ambaye amebaki akuwe mwanaume.
The two agree that by resigning, Chebukati will give Parliament an ample time to restructure the electoral body early enough before the next general election.
Chebukati afuate hiyo barabara, atoke kwa ofisi, ndio sasa wanasiasa kupitia kwa katiba ile tuliweka tuweze kuchagua makomishina wengine ambao wanafaa kuongoza uchaguzi wa 2022.
Sisi kama bunge tuko tayari kuchukua jukumu letu ambalo katiba imeturuhusu. Wakishaondoka tuanze kuangalia ile panel ambayo itaweza kuchagua makomishina wapi.
But despite all the pressure, Chebukati has remained defiant. In a statement, Chebukati said the 3 commissioners who quit on Monday have shown that they were unable to accommodate divergent views at the commission and that he was not ready to resign. Samson Kitavi, Channel 1 News.
And our First Lady Margaret Kenyatta has called for concerted efforts to empower persons living with disability to realize their full potential. The First Lady noted that physically challenged persons have faced unprecedented discrimination, and as such, it was necessary to accord the marginalized groups priority through legislation and policy.
First Lady Margaret Kenyatta was in Migori County to distribute 140 hand-driven carts donated by a faith-based group, Kenya Relief Organization. The First Lady said personnel living with physical disability in the country have faced discrimination both socially and economically, and as such, it was high time efforts were made to ensure they are recognized.
People with disabilities have so much to offer. They are a resource which must be valued and harnessed. It is important that we capture their potential and talent. We must be vigilant in ensuring that we are true to our Constitution to be an inclusive nation.
The First Lady applauded the government for working to improve the welfare of persons with disability, but emphasized that much more needs to be done if their full potential is to be realized.
Research and data providing numbers and knowledge must be reliable to inform health policy decisions, investment priorities, and resource allocation.
She observed the need for the registration of persons living with disability in the country to create a database that will facilitate access to healthcare, education, and other necessary services.
Well, at this point, it's time for us to take our very first breather on Chan 1 News. But of course, a reminder of our conversation after the break. We'll be talking about weather forecasting and, of course, looking at traditional methods as well as modern methods and how both can actually be harnessed to ensure that we achieve the whole aspect of food security. Don't go too far.
Nilikuwa nina watch show, alafu kuna ile number special 10 zilipeanwa pale. Alafu baadaye nikatangaza kuwa mimi ndio mshindi. Naso laba mtaani niko na kiosk yangu pale. Yenye nimeshinda nda boost ile kiosk yangu iko kubwa kidogo, na wasi mcheze. $100 ni ya ukweli.
Nawe pia cheza ushinde leo. Top up kwa paybill number 295888 uanzie sasa.
Some they pay no mind, but now them notice blue. So take your ones, your 50s, put your 100s to your shoes. And to my fans, you know I love you.
Tonight, the tradition African setup has always relied on a number of gifted individuals to predict weather patterns. Timely predictions were so vital that communities knew when to plant certain types of crops and when to expect drought. This kind of individuals are still reverend in some communities, and as Achola Simon found out, tradition will always rival modernity in weather prediction.
In the advent of climate change, weather patterns have increasingly become erratic, with extremes that directly affect food security across the globe. Yields across the country are becoming less and less by the day as the effects become more apparent than ever before. As experts comb through piles and piles of data, employing state-of-the-art machinery to find accurate prediction, a group of traditional rainmakers from Vihiga County are joining forces with modern scientific weather prediction experts in a groundbreaking program to ensure accurate and timely dissemination of weather information to the masses. Meet 85-year-old Mzee Osore. Osore comes from the famed Nganyi community in Mhaya constituency of Vihiga County. joined by Boniface Omena, the two leaders to the traditional weather prediction station called Esichimbiro.
Unlike what you are likely to get in a modern weather prediction station here in Nganyi community, that is in Mhaya constituency in Vihiga County, all the locals here, the rainmakers of this community depend on is the natural environment. Basically what they do is that they observe the trends in their environment and are able to use that to accurately predict what is going to happen in terms of when the rain is coming and when rain is likely to disappear. And of course we are in a similar weather prediction station which is known as Sichimbiro, and what will be happening is that the locals, the rainmakers of this community, will be taking us through the process of actually predicting what how they will know that the rain is coming.
It is here that the community rainmakers observe the shrine's flora and fauna's behavior and predict weather patterns.
The local people base their scientific observations on nature, what they see every day, changes that they are accustomed to seasonally, and each season is something for excitement for them.
Professor Maria Ogalo, the liaison officer for the weather adaptation program carried out by the local universities, the community and IGAD, says the weather prediction from the community rainmakers is almost as accurate as the one given by the scientific methods.
Hii njia yetu yenye tunaangalia mvua, watu wanaiamini kabisa kabisa. Hata sisi kuangalia kwetu hii ya kienyeji na wale wanasayansi wa Kenya Meteorological Department tunakaanga nao, wakitoa yao na sisi tunatoa yetu na tunalinganisha, wanapata iko sambamba.
The rainmakers say the government must incorporate traditional weather predictors in meteorological department as a way of ensuring timely dissemination of weather information to the masses.
Culture and tradition ensured that they got the information firsthand, and now that their women were also taught by the project what they could do to supplement the on-farm productivity, we think, or I think, the project was very, very useful in building their capacity to adaptation and to natural resilience.
Lakini kitu sisi nataka serikali kusaidie, kwa maana sasa wanakuaja hivi na sisi natabiri hewa. Tunaenda wapi? Tunaambia mvua itakuwa namna hii. Tena hao wanasema kweli mvua itakuwa, na kitu yao ya nini ya serikali. Na serikali inakutupa. Sasa tunafanya tu.
Achola Simon reporting for Channel News from Vihiga County.
Now, welcome back, and let's have this conversation. And joining me in studio is the acting director, Kenya Meteorological Department, that is Peter Mbeje. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
And obviously, we would, looking at this conversation from the aspect of harnessing these two methods of weather forecasting to ensure this food security, just like Simon Achola has done from that particular story. But let's begin from this. When you talk about, traditional weather forecasting, there's always this feeling, and it's a general feeling for that matter, that traditional weather forecasting was much more based on superstitions as opposed to science.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Small correction, I'm actually the director of Kenya Meteorological Department.
All right.
Not the acting director.
Okay.
But when you look at some of the methods that I used, then you realize probably there's a bit of superstition. When you hear people slaughtering goats and so on and so forth, you realize or you think that that was superstition.
Yeah.
But we have worked with what we are calling the traditional weather forecasters in a number of areas. And when you talk to them and see what they go through, then you realize there's a lot of science in what they do.
Yeah.
So maybe I can just give you an example that plants and animals and even insects tend to react to rapid changes in weather patterns, like the humidity levels. And these are some of the things that the traditional forecasters depend on to generate their forecasts. One of the things we have realized that they are very good at giving you the short range forecasts. How is it going to be the next 1, 2, 3 days? but they might not be able to give you the long-range forecast, like for example, a whole season like the long-range season. But like I said, there's a lot of science in it. Using animals, plants, reactions of animals, plants, and even insects on changes in humidity, for example.
Absolutely. But if you were to draw parallels between the traditional method of weather forecasting and the modern weather forecasting, what would you say about both?
Well, like I said, the traditional ones are very good for the short-range forecast. We are talking about maybe one day up to about 7 days or so. In science, you can do projections up to 1 year ahead. For Kenya, for example, we do projections for the main rains for seasons just 1 month before. Those are in March, April, May, June, July, August for Western Kenya, and also October, November, December, the short rains. The way to harness both, maybe I can talk about that. The way to harness both is to make sure the two institutions work together. The traditional weather forecasters are respected in their areas of operations, and you can take advantage and utilize them for, also getting into the understanding of what they do, and also making sure that now your information gets to the people as well. It's like you are collaboratively engaging to generate a forecast that is now disseminated to the communities for usage. We've dealt with a number, like I said, and probably I'll give you an example of what we've done in Western Kenya.
Looking at the same, because you talk about modernity and as well as traditional methods and how they can be harnessed, but then the question is, because almost every other time the weatherman where you come from tells us it's going to rain for this entire week, but then it doesn't rain. But yet we are told with the modernity and the use of technology to predict weather, it ought to be one of the most accurate. Where is the disconnect here?
There is no disconnect. I can tell you that from our own assessments, the fact that we say it's going to rain and it doesn't rain is an attitude in people's minds, because we've done assessment on a daily basis. When you have given a forecast for tomorrow, for example, come tomorrow, we'll check the observations and check against the forecast that we've done. When you've done a forecast for a whole week, we'll do the assessment, in fact, on a daily basis and see how it's evolving. When you've done a forecast for a whole month or even a whole season on a daily basis, every 5 days, every 7 days, we assess and see whether it's going as per the projections. So there have been attitudes, and probably it was because the weather was a bit stable in the earlier years before issues of climate change. But with climate change, I think the variability has become quite significant. People are not doing things the way they used to do, because you remember that in the 80s, in the 70s, 60s, people knew by the 15th of March the long rains would be starting, but that's not the case nowadays. There's a lot of variability, and therefore you have to depend on the forecast that we give to plan your activities in agriculture, for example. And that's why more and more people are now understanding the importance of weather and climate, and probably thinking that it's now becoming more accurate than it used to be. But for our own case, we know that, of course, this is a science. It has been evolving. We have been making certain improvements, but the accuracy has been quite good all through.
All right. The availability or unavailability of weather data from where you see it, how does it affect weather forecasting, particularly when we talk about modern weather forecasting?
Modern or otherwise, let me talk about the science.
Yes.
Without data, you cannot do much. Without the observations, you can't do much. It's like when you visit a hospital, the doctor will first of all ask you, how are you feeling, to establish what is going on at that particular time, because that is what he uses now to make a projection. For us to do a forecast for Kenya, for example, we need information not just from Kenya alone, from all over the world, by the way. And there's a very, very effective global dissemination system called the Global Telecommunication System, through which data that's observed all over the globe comes into a specific center for use in forecasting. So data is very key. The more you have, the better the output. And that's why in Kenya we've been trying to improve our station network in terms of the numbers, to make sure that we have an adequate network that can assist us improve our focus as much as possible.
Let's talk about the agenda on food security. And of course, today being about harnessing both ways to ensure that we achieve food security. But then, like you pointed out, traditional methods, and the seasons they knew they were supposed to plant are not the same when you talk about the years we are living in.
Yeah.
But still, you will still find farmers who still want to plant around that time because they still believe that they can, the season will still, go back to the same as was in the old season. So how do we harness to ensure that we have food security in Kenya? Both methods.
One thing, like I said, the traditional forecasters are people who are well respected in their communities, and we can, take advantage and make sure that we utilize them to disseminate information, because their word is respected as much as a word from any administration, for example. So the best is really to embed the two. Talk to the traditional forecasters, look at what they have as their forecast, have your own, discuss and say this is the consensus forecast that you are going to disseminate, and then you can go together and disseminate to the end users. Like you said, things are not the way they were in 80s. Like I said at the beginning, the variability is quite high right now, and therefore that is why using early warning information that we generate is very key in planning your activities in agriculture. What time do you plow, for example, to prepare your land? What time do you plant? What time do you, for example, spray, and so on and so forth? That information is available that you can utilize, because apart from giving the seasonal forecast that assists you to plan, it's like you're telling you on your marks when you give the seasonal forecast for March, April, May at the beginning of April. That's when we normally provide the information. You now know that in such and such areas, these are the kind of rainfall patterns that you're expecting. And based on that, you can plan on what type of crops to plant, for example, in liaison with the Minister of Agriculture, because they have the information. And once you do that, if you utilize the daily, 5-day and 7-day forecast that we generate, you can plan your activities accordingly in terms of your what you're going to do to your crops.
I would imagine a situation where, and there has been little emphasis, particularly from media houses, if you were to say so, on weather forecasting, other than, when already you're predicting doom, either in terms of so much rain that will come, or when the sun is coming, in what you would say, scorching sun that would be coming. That is what the emphasis from the media has been. So I would assume this critical information on when farmers can spray their crops, or when they should be planting, or let's say 30 or 300 millimeters of rain that is going maybe to be in Murang'a or Kakamega, is not information that reaches the farmer every other day. What are you doing from your end to ensure that this critical information that a farmer needs before they engage in the act of farming is able to get to them in time and is beneficial?
Apparently, that information gets the farmers on time.
It does?
It does. Like I said, we generate the seasonal forecast, say for March, April, May in April. We have 47 counties. In each and every county, you have a county director of meteorological services. Okay? Once we have done the national forecast, they take that and downscale to the county level. And they have what they call the participatory scenario planning activities, where they bring the stakeholders on board to look at the forecast and utilize that to develop what they call the contingency plans on different sectors. This is the kind of forecast we are expecting from Murang'a, for example. What kind of agricultural activities are appropriate? So that information gets the farmers, and I can tell you that anytime we delay to generate information and start getting calls, that will tell you that people are really utilizing this information. So it gets out there. It might not be coming to the media houses that this is what the people are doing, but the truth of the matter is that the information really goes to the farmers.
Absolutely.
On time.
But you also talked about perception, as regards what people view the weatherman as vis-a-vis the situation on the ground, and you called it a perception. So I would ask, how are you able to manage perception? Particularly, let's say you've given this information to a farmer who then thinks, this is just the weatherman bluffing, let's just wait and see what happens. How are you able to address these perception issues and ensure that farmers take advantage of the environment, or rather the weather as it is?
One of the things we do is awareness creation on the importance of utilizing weather and climate information for activities in agriculture and other sectors. That's very key. In other aspects, people reverse their perceptions once they have been impacted, and they realize that if we had utilized the information, probably I would not have been severely affected as such. So what I can say probably is that maybe climate change has had its own positive impacts on people realizing the importance of using weather and climate information. When it was stable those years, you know, focus would be a focus, but they knew by 15th I would be planting. But now the variability is quite high. So with climate change and the impacts associated, I think people have realized the importance of using weather and climate information in the activities, not just in agriculture alone, but even other sectors. So, like I said, anytime we delay to generate a specific forecast, we start getting calls. That means people are reutilizing the information and they want to use it for their planning the activities accordingly.
In this season that we are in, already you've released the weather forecast. And obviously as we're moving into other seasons as the year wears out, what would be your advice to farmers? What exactly should they plan? Obviously, you know, moving towards the agenda of food security, and because we are known to, you know, to plant maize, cassava, rice, and all those things. In a season like this one, when we seeing, you know, heavy rainfall in most parts of the country, what are the most, you know, what are the most probable crops to grow? And as we move towards, you know, September, November, December, what are the, you know, other probable plants to grow?
Our main jurisdiction is really to provide early warning information in terms of how are we expecting the rainfall patterns to behave. If you work closely with the Minister of Agriculture, they will tell you that because of the patterns that have been projected, these are the appropriate crops planted in which areas. But for example, if we anticipate deficient rainfall, say in the southeastern lowlands, people should go in for fast maturing, drought-resistant crops, for example, for purpose of food security. And the other thing is that now in Kenya, all of us are consuming ugali. So everybody wants to plant maize, even in areas that it cannot survive, because maize requires certain rainfall
Obviously,
amounts.
that was leading me to the other question that I wanted to ask, because for the purpose of this conversation, we're talking about food security and weather patterns. And as you know, headed towards the conversation on maize, do you feel there's an unnecessary obsession, you know, with planting maize as opposed to other, you know, drought-resistant foods, and what can actually put this country, you know, in the areas of food security?
I think so, because like I said, there are areas that cannot support maize generation, and yet quite a number of people are planting. So you find you don't get sufficient rainfall, but people are still planting maize. The cows, of course, will benefit, but in terms of food security, I don't think we get enough out of it. And if you go back the 60s and 70s, you know that people used to plant drought-resistant crops like cassava, potatoes, and so on and so forth, so that anytime there's food insecurity, you now get back to utilizing those kind of drought-resistant crops. But nowadays, I think you walk anywhere, maybe because of the land is shrinking, population pressure, and so on and so forth, not so many people are still planting those kind of crops. But I can tell you that those are very important crops for addressing issues of food security, instead of just depending on maize alone.
All right. From your focus and from the different stations you have, and for the purposes again of enlightening Kenyans on the importance of, one, conserving the environment, but also being weather sensitive, what would you say are the natural or the human factors that have, what you would say, have disrupted weather forecasting?
Well, I think one of the key issues is deforestation. It doesn't affect weather forecasting as such, but it affects the impacts that we see on the ground. In deforested areas, for example, if you have the kind of heavy rainfall that you are getting right now, what happens is that you get a lot of soil erosion, and that's the fertile soil. This is what goes into rivers for the coastal siltation. At the end of the day, you find they have broken their banks. So that's key. Issues of landslides, for example, in hill areas. If you have heavy rainfall and the soils are loose, the end of the day is landslides, for example. So those are some of the impacts. And I think what people should also understand is that trees are very, very important sources of moisture that gets into the atmosphere through what we call evapotranspiration and forming clouds. You start deforesting, you leave the lands bare. Like I said, erosion becomes quite prominent, and also you reduce the amount of moisture that you're getting into the atmosphere for cloud formations, and therefore you end up with even areas that were high potential areas become semi-arid. So those are some of the impacts, especially in deforestation.
As we wind up, because I understand we've run out of time, tell us about government support. I know the government, obviously, for the food security agenda to succeed, there has to be a lot of investment on the areas of agriculture, but also on weather forecasting. Tell us about government support and investment on weather forecasting, and how, through what is channeled through you as the Kenya Meteorological Department, that is able to sprinkle down to traditional, weather forecasters, and how you are helping them as we wind up.
Mainly the government is supporting us in terms of infrastructure. Like I said from the beginning, you need very good network to be able to do proper forecasts. You need systems that disseminate that information, the headquarters for processing and also sharing with other people. You need systems that you can use to process and generate the forecasts, and also dissemination channels. So the government has been very supportive. At the moment, within Vision 2030, we have a flagship project called modernization of meteorological services, through which the government has been buying also modern equipment like automatic weather stations. At the moment, they have bought about 72 of them that's spread all over the country, and those ones give us information every 10 minutes to the headquarters. So that's a very good investment. But just to wind up with, in terms of how we relate to traditional forecasters, I can quickly say that we have worked with the traditional forecasters in Ibunyori, the Nganye family, and through that we have put up a climate information center within their locality, and there's also a community radio station that they use to disseminate climate information to the community that is used for mitigating any impacts of the extremes.
All right. So there's a trickle-down effect.
There's a trickle-down effect.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter Ambeje, the Director of Kenya Meteorological Department, and thank you again for your time and your conversation, and again the contribution to this whole conversation, very much appreciated. But of course, the food security agenda is something we'll continue talking about and touching on almost on a very daily basis, because these are the things that are at the heart of Kenyans, and they need things we need to talk about on a daily basis. Regina Manyara Gitao is up next with business.
This week on Road to Success, our guest is Patricia Mwangi of Campus Kenya.
Yes, I think that the greatest fear that people have is trust. Will you deliver on time? And so once you build a reputation whereby you guarantee your customer that yes, I will deliver on time, even without you checking